I'm Cindy Brocker. I'm the Communications Director for NCECA, the almost voiceless Communications Director for NCECA. And I'm very excited about this panel. So this is the social media experiment. Of course, you all know that. That's why you're in here. I would like to encourage you to move forward. There's a very good reason for this, because there are things sitting on the table that are going to be given away, and you need to be within throwing distance. Or I could just take them right now, and that would be fine with me. Oh, I love that. Gosh, that works great. Yeah. I'm going to turn it over now to Amanda, and she's going to introduce the rest of the panel and have a fantastic time. Thank you.
Hi. Excuse me 1 second here.
Come on, guys. You all have to take a picture.
Selfie. All right. I'll post that later. All right, so the social media experiment. I named the title that, obviously social media, but this is all an experiment. This is an experiment for me, standing up here talking to people about something I am not an expert in by any means. I'm still learning. Pretty sure we all feel the same way, but we live, we learn, we experiment. So thank you to Cindy, Josh, Steve, everyone from NCECA. It's been wonderful working on this panel, connecting, creating this community online, outside of the conference, making it work year-round, and helping to get people online and talking to each other. We tend to hole up in our studios, and getting people to network during the year, create that community through social media. It's perfect. So who I am. I started on social media in college because I was too scared to talk to boys to their face. It was easier to text and chat on a computer. I started doing more and more, signing up for more networks, and I joined Twitter in 2009 so I could go to Comic-Con and meet celebrities. I met Dr. Who, which was awesome. And then I got divorced. Things went kind of crazy in my life, and I started meeting these people online and networking and found my place. And here's some of my work. My studio practice is all about these narrative imagery about escapism, imaginary worlds. My degree is actually in Spanish literature. So social media is a little bit natural for me because it is an escape from your daily life. It's a way of communicating outside of that. And so my imagery is really a reference to that narrative and that escapism, that need to belong somewhere, but also maybe it's not where you are right now. I'm using poppies and other prints that escaping to the circus type of thing, really relieving the stress of everyday life, which is a lot of what social media can be for me, talking to people who share the same experiences, share the same ideas. It's an escape from the routine of where I am, and it's done a lot for me in my life. It's why I'm here right now. Last year, I started Instagramming for NCECA, and so if you follow the @NCECA account on Instagram, that's usually me. Hi, it's nice to meet you all. And it's been a really great thing for me because it's pushed me outside of my own boundaries, and also I think has done a lot for NCECA growing the social media. We've been a really good fit, I believe. Oops. I made this little graphic for any of you who aren't familiar with all of the social media. I used that mugs, since we're all familiar with mugs. Twitter, I'm making mugs. Facebook, I like mugs. Instagram, Mugshot Monday. Hopefully everyone will do that this next Monday. And all of the different things can be pretty easily explained through visuals. This image, if you really want it, is available through the app. If you go into the app and look up my name, you can actually grab this. Feel free to share it. Stick it up places, show people. I don't mind you using it. It's just a little drawing I did. And I like people kind of proliferating that message of social media. It's fun. It's all sorts of different varieties of using things. There's also a social media lexicon that you can get on the app. that I spent a lot of time creating this glossary of terms. So when I say hashtag, or I say handle, or profile, or aggregator, all of those terms are much better explained it's 4 pages. You can print it off at home. And anytime anyone says something like LOL, BRB, those are also explained in there. So you never have to worry about not understanding a text message. Some of what I did with the lexicon is right here. You can actually see, if you go into the app, use the NCECA app, you can see what I've done here, and it's pretty straightforward for right now. Some of these things are going to change. As is social media, it's constantly moving, but you'll get there. It's pretty fun. I had a good time doing this, actually. This is my website, and you can also go and get these things from there if you get home and you want to get it off your phone. And there's also an article I wrote for the conference that didn't make it into the journal somehow, and you can get that there. And it talks about social media strategies. So this is just my self-promo right here. Here is a fun comic. History of social media. Stole this from Mashable. I like Mashable. The internet is a great place. But we have always had this inherent need to share our lives with other people. Cave drawings, pictograms. That's sharing part of your life. Every time you tell someone how you're doing today, that's sharing your life. And social media is making that easier. It's making it easier to share everything we do, to connect, to reach out, and touch other people. So we started, like I said, with AOL Instant Messenger, dorm rooms. That was it for me. If you don't know AIM, don't worry, it wasn't that amazing. Then we've got Facebook, which you can do on your phone. You can make really meta posts about posting about being in a conference and post it, and everyone can see it. It's on your timeline. It's got a lot of selfies, a lot of cat photos. Very first photo I ever posted on Facebook, myself, my cat, who's 10 years old now. It's fantastic. You have a profile page, you have images, you can do so much, you can share so much about yourself on these pages very easily. There are memes, which is the only reason to be on the internet sometimes. These funny videos, all of these things. If you know this one, raise your hand. Yeah, if you don't, look it up. It's really funny. It's horrible, but it's funny. We have Twitter. Twitter is, the short, sweet, 140 character commentary on life. It's mostly pithy if you're me. Short comments. But you also get to share pictures and images. It's mostly short. Pinterest, you can curate, you can collect, you can reference, you can promote, you can share just about anything from recipes to work to, pictures of dogs. It's everything. It's Pinterest. It's fun. You should try it. Another shot of my website, because Studio Potter magazine, they have a digital issue coming out, and I've had an article in there. And notice my Instagram is linked to my website. You can cross-promote with these social media, and you should. It makes things a lot easier. I've got a Twitter for my second Etsy shop that does really well. You can have multiples of these. Here it is. It's doing pretty well. Etsy. Etsy is good. Justin's going to talk more about Etsy later. Instagram. Instagram is the big one here. Instagram is highly visual. If you don't Instagram, you're missing out, because Instagram for artists, especially a studio artist like me, is kind of a key to social media. You can share all of these parts of your process and a little bit of your own life, and people can connect to what's happening behind the art. They can see all of that. It's a visual media for visual artists. We connect with each other, and it's the best way to push your work to the public because it's a visual medium. There are other projects. You can use hashtags to curate on Instagram. So you get things like Ayumi Horier's Pots in Action that's been happening, which is used via hashtag and also has its own account. But it curates these images that are beautiful and wonderful and great to follow along and see. So this is what you're missing out on if you're not on Instagram. Things like this. And the selfies, always with the selfies. At some point you have to take a selfie. They should usually be taken in a funny way with pottery. The last thing that I do is I also write for the NCECA blog, and this post was all about online resources for ceramics. Blogging is not as popular as it used to be, but we can totally bring that back if you participate. And if you want to participate, come talk to me afterwards, because we want you to blog for NCECA. We want you. So talk to me afterwards, I'll hook you up. The first thing I worked on was the 50 Plates project for Instagram, for NCECA, and curated all of these plates with the hashtag 50Plates. And you can go back and you can still see those now by searching that hashtag. And that's one of the great things about social media is you can always search for these things. They're always going to be there. They may not be at the top of your feed anymore, but they're always going to be there. And you can make connections. You never know what's going to happen. I made 200 bowls for a restaurant that's opening in Des Moines. He found me on Twitter. Yep, that was a big one. I also met the Travelocity gnome this year. He bought me dinner. These two fine folks are my pint night crew. We get beers every Wednesday when we can. I made them all custom pint glasses for it. We all met on Twitter. We've been best friends for 4 years. And then you get gems like this. This is just for fun. So there's the NCECA account. Follow it now if you aren't already following it. And that's me. You can ask me questions later, but I'm going to let Mr. Brian Harper and his beard come talk to you.
All right, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. This is really exciting to see so many people here. It's really great. And thank you to Cindy for that great introduction, and thank you to Amanda for inviting me to be on this panel, and for organizing our efforts throughout the last couple of months. This image here is an image from my Instagram account, and it represents me feeling lucky to be involved in such a great community of people. And coming together as we do in these conferences is really a special thing. I feel so fortunate and inspired to be a part of it. And I'm also inspired by people like Aaron Swartz. And if you don't know who Aaron is, Aaron was an activist, a thinker, a visionary. He started writing software when he was 9 years old. In his 20s, he founded Demand Progress, which is the organization that launched the campaign to stop the internet censorship bills known as SOPA and PIPA. In 2011, he was arrested by authorities at MIT for illegally downloading articles off the database JSTOR. And the federal government prosecuted him under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And he was facing 35 years in prison, and he sadly committed suicide. Around this time, I started doing some more research on Aaron, and I came across this quote. And he said, "It's not enough to live in the world as it is." And it just resonated with me so much that it was a reminder that we need to give back and participate and contribute to the world around us and to each other. And I've really taken that to heart in thinking about my path and my sort of vision. And so the ways in which I try to give back are through my family, my artwork, my peers, my teaching, the field. And all of these things are connected in a really beautiful way. And social media can play a role in reinforcing and maintaining those connections. One of the ways I try to give back is through my work on a website and nonprofit organization that I founded called artaccess.org. And on ArtAccess, we host hundreds of artists, and each artist has a page on the website with 10 images of their work. There are links to their artist statement, their CV, their bio, links to their websites. And prospective applicants to the website are juried in rotating juries of current members of the site and their peers in the field. And this allows ArtAccess to provide one of the largest collections of peer-reviewed ceramic work online. And the pages on the ArtAccess website are viewed thousands of times every day, but oftentimes they are accessed through the individual artist pages themselves and not through the homepage. And this presents us a challenge when we want to let viewers know of new content and updated people on the site. And so we use our social media outlets to, we use them as a tool to disseminate information about updated content and new members, but also as a way to promote our members' professional activities. On our Facebook and Instagram and Twitter feeds, we post notices of upcoming exhibitions and other professional activities of our members. And this presents an avenue for us to stay true to our mission, which is to connect viewers to artists. For we see our social media presence as a way to provide a lasting connection between our viewers and our members. And I'm also the head of the ceramics program at Indiana University Southeast, and I strive to use this opportunity to participate in our community through the commitment I make to my students. And I feel really lucky. You know, I have great students that are engaging in the practice of making art every day. And in the IUS ceramics program, we work on everything from mold making to building kills to showing our work off campus to dumpster diving. And I just wanted to show you a few images of some of my students' work. And I'm inspired by their work. I'm inspired by their curiosity. And I'm always striving to build a program that produces varied styles of work and work that is well made and well thought out. And I definitely feed off of that energy. I use our social media to help connect current students, but also alumni and prospective students to the program. Our Facebook page here has an annual reach of over 25,000 people and has seen a growth in followers of about 35% every year for the past 4 years. And my administration at the university has definitely taken notice of these outreach efforts, and I now report these statistics on my faculty annual reports. Additionally, these efforts on this Facebook page help to bring exposure to my students and their work, and hopefully open some doors for them professionally as they move forward in their careers. And I also contribute through my artwork. The next few images are of some current work, a body of work I call the Scaffolding Series. And this work uses the objects in the JCPenney Home Collection as a vehicle to juxtapose handmade scaffolding with the industrial nature of the dishes themselves. In this work, I'm interested in the irony of the use of the word home in this collection, as the dishes themselves bear no resemblance to any of the abstract qualities of what we think of when we think of our home. And they are void of any touch of the human hand and empty of any intangibles that come to mind when thinking of your home. Additionally, I'm interested in how the scaffolding in this work supports yet is shaped by the very thing it supports. And this is a reference to the support structure needed for the production and delivery of the vessels into the home. And this is a detail of that last image. And more can be found on my website at brianharperstudio.com if you're interested. And I use social media to project my activity in the field, as well as project my activity in the studio, as well as my activities in the field. And I use these outlets as a connection thread to sort of tie together different aspects of my life. And what I wanted to talk a little bit about here today was that social media can be a tool that is more than just producing content. And it has an added value in terms of the practice of listening to the world around you. And as cultural producers, we have the responsibility to engage with and interpret the world around us. Social media can play an important role in developing a socially conscious creative practice. Of all the platforms, Twitter is the most suited to listening, allowing for cross-cultural connections that are not as readily available on other platforms. Facebook's use of heavy algorithmic filtering, for example, has rendered it nearly useless as a venue for breaking news. And breaking news can happen really, really fast on Twitter. The tweets that you see here on the screen are examples of tweets from people in New York City that received word of an earthquake that originated in Richmond, Virginia, before they felt the tremors in New York City. And what this shows is not only the speed at which news can travel on Twitter, but it also shows the broadcasting power of an individual person or individual citizen. And I joined Twitter in June of 2009, just as the election protests in Tehran were breaking out. Inspired by the ability to connect with others around the world, I saw that I could follow Iranian bloggers as they live tweeted events during the government crackdown. I was awed by the ability we now have to connect to others around the world. So during the protests in Ferguson, Missouri in late 2014, I followed people like Basim Masri, who you see here, who grew up and went to high school there, and he was live tweeting and live streaming video from within the protests. And while I certainly tuned in to CNN for broader context, my thoughts on the event were informed by combining mainstream media and direct citizen reporting. And in this case, from somebody who is actually from the area and live tweeting from within the protests themselves. And this is why when news is breaking somewhere in the world, I go straight to Twitter, as it offers direct access to the citizens who are actually in the event as it's unfolding. And beyond the individual connections that can be made on social media, Twitter also provides the opportunity for global conversations. And an example of this is found in the timeline of tweets from Ferguson, Missouri. And so in the top left, on August 9th, Michael Brown is shot around noon local time in Ferguson, Missouri. So you see just a few tweets there. August 10th, top right, St. Louis County Police Chief Joe Belmer says Brown was unarmed, and the tweets start increasing throughout the United States and to Europe. August 12th, protests increase, and police begin firing tear gas on the protesters, and you can see in the bottom left the persistence of the tweets is expanding throughout the United States and again in Europe and Australia. And bottom right, protests erupt, and a global conversation increases. This next slide is a video of, let's hope it's going to load, okay. This next slide is a video of, it's about to play at some point. It is playing, okay, good. So this video is the frequency of tweets from Ferguson, Missouri, or about Ferguson, during the announcement, the grand jury announcement. And you can see that about halfway through it, and I can't see it from here, it starts to expand as soon as the announcement is made. And then about halfway through, the announcement is made, and then you can see the pervasiveness of the conversation that's happening on Twitter. Is it stopped? Okay, good. Okay, and so what all those dots on that map represent are people connecting to other people. And social media allows for this. And it's hard to understate the potential value of these connections and what they can mean for an artist interested in learning more about the world. First, these connections are non-hierarchical, so one can interact with sources directly and without another's filter. Secondly, the number of connections in a network, such as Twitter, is far greater than the number of its users. And this is shown by the equation n times n-1 divided by 2 in Metcalfe's law, which counts the number of pairs in a connected system and demonstrates the dramatic rise of that number as the number of its users increases. So for example, a network of 5 people has 10 possible connections. A network of 1,000 people has 499,000 connections. And a network of 1 million people has over 500 billion possible connections. And as artists and culture makers, we need to push ourselves to be involved in an increasingly connected world, not only to stay connected with those within our circles, but also to broaden our circles to include a blogger in Iran or a protester in Missouri. In the 21st century, one person from the other side of the world can inform your voice as an artist. And that, to me, is the value of social media, the ability to listen to and connect with those beyond your immediate circle and from a culture outside of your own. And thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. The next speaker... The next speaker is Justin Rawshank.
Well, thanks to all of you for coming. I'm here to talk about my use of social media as a studio artist and as a small business owner. And when I think about using social media, I really do think about it as a small business owner, not just artist, because those two things for me really are integrated. And I think one of the things I like about social media is it allows me to help find my audience and then sort of respond to my audience and then get feedback from my audience. And so, and often that can happen instantaneously. And it's a really great way as a small business owner to learn about my marketing potential and where things are coming from. So I also think about social media from before social media existed. My background, I started a nonprofit organization in Pittsburgh called the Union Project back in 2001. And that was before Facebook, before Twitter or Instagram or any of those things. And my role in starting that organization was as a community organizer. And I was responsible for telling people about not only my vision for the organization, but then for recruiting people to give us money, to help us renovate the building, and particularly to help us restore over 150 stained glass windows that we didn't have money to fix. And so those things have impacted me by learning about what people are interested in face-to-face conversations and translating those things into online conversations now that social media is so pervasive. When I started the Union Project, my whole vision was to have a clay studio in the heart of Pittsburgh, but it took 5 years of community organizing to get to the point where I could even start building a clay studio. But now there is a clay studio there, and they're on social media, unionproject.org. It's a great place, but it also is built on the idea that relationships exist in a face-to-face way, and those can be boosted by using social media. It also has a wood kiln there in western Pennsylvania. It's the only community wood kiln available to folks. So those are some shots of the wood kiln. In 2009, I moved away from the city of Pittsburgh into the country in northern Indiana. I live in Goshen now, and I have a full-time clay studio practice there. So I moved from being well-connected in face-to-face relationships in the city to being very unconnected in a rural environment in northern Indiana, and setting up a business there. And in many ways, it didn't make a lot of sense to move there, but I really wanted to live in the woods. And so social media, for me, it intersected in a way that was right about the time when Facebook started. I set up a Facebook page, and Facebook at that time and still today has been sort of my marketing hub. It's a way for me to tell people about my studio. I don't have a shop at my studio. It's just a 600 square foot garage studio. So I tell the world about what I'm doing and allow them to see my process using social media instead of a storefront. So these are some shots of my studio practice. Make lots of mugs and lots of functional pots. And I use social media to advertise. One of the great things I think with social media is that it can be so accessible. Instead of having a storefront, I have an iPhone, and I have this sort of makeshift photo booth. So I can unload my kiln, walk my pot over to my photo booth, snap a picture, and sell the pot before it's even cooled from the firing. And all of that is done simply with the iPhone that's in my pocket. I don't have to have any sort of fancy setup. I can use Instagram as a way to filter those ideas out to the world. I can use Instagram to direct people to my Etsy page and say, hey, do you like this? It just came out of the kiln. It's actually still hot, and you can buy it right now. And then, of course, my marketing department is Facebook. So people can follow me on Facebook regularly. And then if they're interested in more of a story, they can come back to other sort of social media feeds to find out more details. Of course, I have a website, and my wife is also an artist. She just started using Instagram 6 months ago, and she had 100 users, or 100 followers. 6 months later, she's over 30,000 followers. It's really mind-blowing. She actually doesn't really like social media. But she does these really cool paintings and she's been painting in miniature for 10 years, trying to figure out a way to make her paintings accessible. And she started this daily practice and started posting on Instagram, and all of a sudden her work is completely accessible to people all over the world in a way that's overwhelming to her. And so the idea of having social media as a way to connect with everyone around the world is really powerful for those of us that live in a place like Goshen where nobody is actually coming on a regular basis. I also think one of the great tools with social media is the idea that you can shoot a shot of a pot like this in your photo booth, but you can also shoot shots that look really cool and highlight the idea of that pot, but it's just a pot that's that I'm holding under my kitchen counter in a really terrible way. But if you shoot it in the right way using an iPhone, you can show off what's going on. I also use my iPhone as a way to record my life. and a way that I can interact with the world around me. So I have 2 kids. I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old son. We do a lot of stuff together, including finger painting. And when I have my iPhone with me, I can document that stuff for myself, but that can inform my studio practice too. And I can take and record my ideas that I'm living my life, and that can come back and be sort of a portal into future work and how that might develop. So these are some shots of work that was inspired by just an interaction with my kids. I also think one of the great things about social media is the idea that you're just putting yourself out there and trusting that people will find you. And so I made this Ruth Bader Ginsburg mug for a friend of mine out of a request. I thought, oh, that's cool. I'll put it up on Etsy. It's picked up by a random blog in Canada that I know nothing about. They don't ask me if they can put anything about it. And, you know, a couple days later, I've sold 150 of these mugs. And I have no idea why. But because I put myself out there, people are interested in it. And the same thing with my wife. You know, she can do a painting like that and all of a sudden get it published in a book just because you're putting yourself out there. So I think there's this idea that with social media, it's just a way to say, this is what I'm doing, and if you're interested, you can join in. If you're not, you can move on. I also, here's the 2 gratuitous shots of my kids. It's a way to tell your story as an artist and someone who's working in the field, and that helps to make you accessible. So I'm going to introduce Leslie as the last person.
Hi, everybody. I feel a little empty-handed right now, but I see most of you are not. Anyways, it's great to be here, and I really want to thank Amanda for keeping us organized. We had meetings every month, and I got to know these people, and other than Amanda, we all met today about 20 minutes ago for the first time in real life. But we were using Skype, so I kind of knew what they looked like, and because we've been following each other, I've learned a lot about their lives, and they have about mine. So, okay, this is where I live, and I've had a business that actually you sell to now. It's now named Pinch. In the beginning, it was Pinch Pottery, and it was a studio and a place to make things and sell things, and my whole life has been pretty much devoted to that. So now it's no longer mine, and I have had 6 locations for physical gallery space over the last 30 years. The pictures you're looking at right now, I guess they went on their own, but this is where I live and work, and the top floor is where Sergei Supov has his studio. The second floor, one down, is our living quarters, and then the first floor is office, studio, warehouse, showroom, and there's the river. And so this is where our operations are based. And when I say our, there's a lot of us involved. So even though I am the Leslie Farron of Farron Contemporary, we have a big team. This is basically the office, and where works we're currently handling are on view. And people don't often stop by, and they certainly don't stop by unannounced, because we're 3.5 hours from New York and 3 hours from Boston, but sort of equally inaccessible from everywhere. Last year, in a funded project, Vipuv Trivlasa came, and we had art camp, and this was the sort of concluding night where we had dinner for 40. We had 8 people working together for 2 weeks and produced tableware and the dinner for 40 and all of the amusements on the table. So I think some of you saw those pictures. This is the art campers. And some of them were busily social networking all the way through, and others were learning how to do it along the way. We also got out ceramics and had a pinch-a-thon, and I did start as a potter, and pinching was my main way of making things, which is why we named the business Pinch. And so I hadn't touched clay until I went to China last summer. I was asked to come in and work with students, and they didn't read very far into my resume and thought I was an artist. So I had to actually use the incredible Yixing clay and do a demo. I thought I was going to do PowerPoints and show them the world of contemporary ceramics, but we did both. So this was a picture in the summer, right before I left for China. And that's what it looked like about a week before we came here. And probably it'll still look like that when we go home, maybe a little dirtier. So this is the family that lives there, and I call it the family because some of them are actually related to me. But I have 2 children, Graham and Lucy, and my mother lives next door. And Sergey and Kadri and Rosie, Sergey Yusupov, Kadri Parnaments, they're both adult artists. And Rosie is 5 years old and is an incredible artist. And their show opens at our new location in North Adams. So Fair and Contemporary is basically our overall umbrella, and Project Art in the studio is managed by Alex Jellerberg, and we have visiting artists. We had Brad Clem last week and Paul Scott for 2 weeks before the conference. And Fair and Contemporary has a bookkeeper who's been there since the Pinch days. And this is our space in North Adams called Independent Art Projects. It's a shared gallery space with 2 galleries, Cynthia Reeves and Fair and Contemporary. And we have a gallery manager. And this is the pictures from Art Camp that was installed there after the campers left. We have lots of visiting artists. It's Paul Scott, and we wandered around Mass MoCA. The Mass MoCA is the largest art museum in the world in terms of its floor plan, and all of the artwork is very large. And the picture you're looking at there is in front of Saul LeWitt, and there are 3 floors of 100 wall drawings of Saul LeWitt that's on view for 20 years. The campus there is expanding, and it's a fabulous place to visit. And so when we opened up this space here, Sin Ying Ho's vases were there, and it was the first gallery space I think I've ever had where I actually had a forklift show up and be able to handle the scale of this work, because that's probably one of the smaller pieces that they handle. But it's been a great place. We opened in June, and we are open this weekend if you happen to drive through that area. This is one of my favorite exhibits to take people to that's in the main part of the building. That's Kurt Weiser taking pictures. And then this is our fabulous John Pollock photographer who comes in and shoots regularly, a big part of our team. That's Wendy Gers, and I had a hard time keeping up with her as she traipsed around the Saul LeWitt paintings. And this is in a room called Filthy Lucre, and it is based on the room at the Freer Sackler, the Peacock Room, Whistler's Peacock Room. So she was busy taking pictures, and it's kind of a room that's about the decay of ceramics in society based on this room that's at the Freer Sackler. And its pottery is all found pottery, except for a couple of pieces that were made, and it's all painted with acrylic, kind of the anti-pot. So our website really is our gallery to most of the world, because very few people who actually buy things from us have ever been to see us. A lot of people come see us, but they're not the ones who typically buy things, which is okay, but it's not what everybody says. How are sales at your new place? And I'm like, well, it's a story that's kind of unfolding still. Because we're at a museum location, I think most people come in and enjoy the art for what it is, which is actually quite pure. But in the meantime, the website, we've always had to have a website because we're so remote. and that the people who are really after the information that we have about the artwork are from all over the world. So I love the website, and it's something that we spend a tremendous amount of time with a graphic designer, photographer, and myself. So it's got a lot of layers, and this is our team. And there we do all sorts of things with private collections, public collections, direct sales, art fairs, and all members of the team are involved in all parts of it. This is how you access it, and you can sign up for our weekly, sometimes twice weekly, MailChimp e-blasts, and you can put in your categories, and we'll try not to send you as many as some other people, but it's a great tool. This is one of our weeklies, and it was the news about Sergey's schedule for basically for the next 3 months. And we probably will be developing specialized lists. We are definitely developing specialized lists so that they're regional or specific interests. So you might get this one again when he comes to your town. Jason Walker is an artist from the Seattle area, and he had an exhibition up at Bellevue Art Museum, and now is one in the Society for Contemporary Craft in Pittsburgh. So what we do with things like that is create all of the news and information marketing systems for these exhibitions that are taking place somewhere else for an artist who we represent. So any of you who are going to be in Pittsburgh, April 16th, we have a Walker weekend and talks and demos involved. And then we work locally with the Mount Holyoke Art Museum. They've had a year-long program on 6,000 years of ceramics. So other than what you typically think of as a gallery, we kind of cover, we go back and forth between what the artist's needs are and what their work needs are and what our collectors' needs are. So most of the time that has nothing to do with the physical space, either in Cummington, Mass, or in North Adams, Mass. We've been doing a lot with private collections, sometimes the entire collection, like this one, the Pennington collection, or individual pieces that a collector or an artist is looking to sell. Trying to sort of provide a way of selling things quietly, softly, respectfully, and not brutally like in an auction. So we have a news section, and we try very hard to get all the news that's been written about us and our artists in a place where you can access them, and then we can link to those using other social media to deliver the information. We always have a nice selection of teapots and sort of bring out a teapot show online once or twice a year when the work is in front of us that we have enough of it to send out a news. We do, but otherwise it's there and it's always changing. So we manage several Facebook accounts. This one is the one for the gallery or the business. This one is my own. So sometimes they go back and forth, and their functions are always changing. Facebook's a big challenge to keep up with, and so sometimes you can link and highlight from one platform and not the other. So they're kind of, I try to keep a different voice for each one of the social media platforms, and this one is what I do, and the one before the Fair and Contemporary is really just about the business. So then we have the Facebook account and the website for Project Art, which is the building operation. And then independent art projects, same set of things. MailChimp, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's like, a lot of these things are related and the same content's going out several different times, but to different audiences. So Instagram's been the most active now that, like the others have been saying, you just have your phone. The phone is your office. The phone is the easiest bit of equipment, and you can share quickly through Instagram. When I have time, I try really hard to come back in and really correct the captions on it and do all of the linking and the highlights, but sometimes things go very quickly. So if you're looking at anything I'm doing here at the conference, it says captions to follow. But it's a great way to sort of give an overview of, I try to post once a day, sort of to give a geographic and subject to what we're doing each day. and then try to orient it at the audiences of what we're doing. So there's a hashtag Fair and Contemporary on the road, and that's when we're going quickly through a lot of different places and not at home. And then using Instagram, you can tweet right from Instagram, and occasionally I'll link an article. I could kind of just do this all day long. By the time you've checked all the social media platforms, you have to start again because it's all new material every couple hours. So I try to do it in the morning and then once again at the end of the day, and not interrupt the whole process of the day. But it also feeds to Tumblr, so depending on who's interested in reading material, which way you can access us in lots of different platforms. So there they are, and it's kind of complicated, but I think everybody finds their own way of accessing us. Thanks.
All right, so now we've heard from a studio potter, from an educator, from a gallery, about how social media can be used and is important. And now I'm going to ask them some questions. Maybe some tough answers. But also, there will be a chance for you guys to ask questions afterwards. And then we recommend that you use the hashtag #SocialClay. If you ask any questions online, I'm going to be following this hashtag on Instagram and Twitter. And there's a #SocialClay group on Facebook, and I will still be checking that. And if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them. I'm going to see if I can get them to take a break from their busy, busy lives and answer them as well. So let's say someone wants to join social media for the first time. If you could choose just one platform for that person to get started, what would each of you choose? I'll start with Leslie.
Well, I'm a big fan of Instagram these days, but you have to have a phone. So it's sort of assuming you have a phone. Instagram is the easiest and the fastest way of communicating with visual people using visual means.
I think for me, it would. I would also ask the question of the person that's interested in doing this, what they want to get out of it. And I think for me, I use each platform for different reasons. I on Twitter, I don't produce that much. I follow a lot. I follow things that are happening, and so I think I'm certainly gravitating towards Instagram and Twitter. The thing about Facebook is the filtering is so intense these days that it starts to really raise a lot of questions in my mind about it as a viable source for spreading information. But
yeah, I think I would agree. Instagram for me is as a visual person, it's the way that not only I like to distribute content, but the way that I like to take it in. So if I were getting started with anything, it would be Instagram first, and then other things later.
Instagram, everybody. I'm going to start with Brian next. How does social media inform your practice as an educator? Why is it important for you to engage in this form of communication?
Well, for me, I think it's important to engage potential students and current students on the platforms that they're most comfortable with. And so that's why I've opened up, the account, the IUS Ceramics accounts in Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And it's important because it's just a really, it's a great way to disseminate information about the program. And so, I come to the conference and I run into people here and they know what my students are making in New Albany, Indiana. And that's a pretty cool thing. It's a pretty exciting thing. And so for me, that's why it's important.
Cool. And Leslie, I'm gonna get to you next. Do you think an online or social media presence has become a requirement for artists? And how do you see this changing the field? I mean, as a gallery, you have represented artists that you do their social media a lot for them. So how do you see that difference between artists that you represent and artists that maybe aren't represented?
Well, I met Vipu through social media. as probably everybody else has too. But so I think it's an important tool for presenting and broadcasting or publishing your work. It's somewhat scattershot, but if you don't have a gallery, it's a great way of getting your work out because you don't have a gallery who's going to do it for you. Is it necessary? Well, I mean, I think that goes back to what you're saying is what are your goals and what do you want out of it? And it's good to know that before jumping in and finding out the water's really, really cold. I think there are artists, so that's the difference between the unrepresented artist and the represented artist, and we had a long discussion about this, so I think that's why the question is here. And I tend to do a lot of the social media for the artists whose work I'm the primary dealer for, and I'm hoping that is providing them with a lot more consistency, but also time in the studio that they don't have to be doing it. So, and I think if you think of like artists with the big A-R-T, they work with dealers, and this whole thing I think is way more active in craft and material-based artists and their communities than there is in the art world, although there are several people who have very active feeds that are artists or art dealers in the art world, and that's like a whole nother section. But when it comes to this marketing question, I think it's a good thing to think of is, how are you representing yourself and where do you want to go with that? And maybe is it time to shift from business and personal, split these things into two things?
Great. I have a question that's not on the page. Since it's social media experiments here, we're all experimenting with our feeds, trying things out when we're posting. Have any of you ever made a major social media faux pas?
I did. I'm sure I've been many, but I haven't always been told what they were. But when we were working on the Ceramic Top 40 exhibition, some of the pieces came in broken. So I referenced the disasters. And one of my very good friend colleagues called me, and she said, "You can't make jokes about this. People take this very seriously. And they might not know what you're referring to, and they might think that you think your show is a disaster." And I was like, "Oh, right. I'm thinking it's funny," and was making an ironic statement about it. And she just said, "You can't do that." So it came down quickly.
I have the problem a lot that sarcasm is not read well online. I'm very sarcastic, so I get myself into trouble occasionally. Either of you guys?
Nothing really comes to mind, but that doesn't mean it hasn't happened and people just didn't tell me about it. But I also, I think for me with social media, I try to keep my social media practice as professional as possible to eliminate the possibility of there being faux pas, and so I use it. I try not to post personal things that might offend someone else. And my feeling is that if, with social and political statements and things like that could lead to faux pas, the people that agree with me already agree with me, and the people that don't won't anyways. And so I leave that stuff off social media and prefer to talk about that elsewhere to eliminate that possibility.
I've had a couple. I think that, I had one that I made a post complaining about all of the cup shows that are out there. And just saying that we should broaden our horizons a little bit. And then about 20 minutes after I posted it, I realized I was jurying a cup show about a month later. And so that was kind of unfortunate. But and then when I juried it, it was tremendous, and it was so much fun and rewarding, and I loved it. So that was maybe a mistake. And then also, I think I had one that on Instagram, I noticed that every time I posted a picture of one of my dogs, I would lose a follower or two. And then I posted another one, and I just said, if you don't like my dogs, then don't follow this account. And I lost a couple more, but. It's all right. Which actually one of them is in this. I don't know if it's already gone through, but
Oh, it's later.
there's one that he looks a lot like Don Corleone from The Godfather.
So that segues perfectly into what are your social media values? Any personal rules and guidelines to content, posting, scheduling, and how did you figure these things out? You know, losing followers is one way. How do you tell your story? Anyone?
Well,
Raise your hand.
For me, I think about social media the same way I think about a relationship with a real person, and so it's a direct reflection of my own personal values. And I think, just to read a list of my values, kindness, regular and dedicated interaction, honesty, willingness to learn, grow, and understand, and two-way communication with genuine feedback. I think, for me, I'm an active member of social media, which means not only can I view someone's feed, but as a viewer, it should be my responsibility to respond on occasion. And because I want people to give me feedback on social media, so if I'm not doing that, I'm not actively engaging with others. Similar to if I'm having a face-to-face conversation with Brian and he just stares at me blankly, it's not fun. And so I don't want him to stare at me blankly in person, nor do I want him to stare at me blankly on social media.
Yeah, I think for me, I really get interested in following people's accounts that mix and match their professional work and other things from their lives. And so I try to do the same. I will post things that are happening in my studio. I'll post things about, especially on Instagram. So Instagram feed might be something in the studio, something that's happening with my students, something that is happening with one of my dogs. And I really like that when I'm looking at other people's accounts. I want to know that there's a human being behind it. I want to know that there is something that I can connect to because, as we've been talking about a few times on this panel, like these are connections between people, and I personally like when there's just more information that I feel like when I meet somebody for the first time and I follow them online, I know a little bit about their lives. I get little snippets into what they do on a Saturday afternoon with their family, and I think that's valuable information. And I also feel like for me, I don't post a lot of things that, or I try not to. That if I'm going through a time, maybe a week or so, where I'm not doing a lot of really interesting things, then I don't post a lot of things during that week. And so I try to just post when things are, interesting things are happening.
Well, I had 2 teenagers. Now I only have one. The other one's now 21. And it was interesting because all of this sort of started up while they were young enough to teach me. So it was really great that these guys were around this last year as I lost my access to, cutting edge words, techniques. And I also was smacked down many, many times for, doing things that they didn't approve of. So they're really good editors, and they did not like it if I was using them to sell me. So we made early on rules about not posting each other without, the sort of the ability of them to edit. So I just basically didn't really want to use a lot of pictures of my children in my business. And it was kind of mutual. They didn't use any pictures of me with their friends either. So occasional birthday cakes and, life moments I think are fine. And, I sort of use their, that's TMI mom, and they do the same, especially when they went to college and I was following them around with their glasses of wine and other things. So that I think was like the first, like somebody once said, if you're a politician, don't get your picture taken with a glass of wine, And so I told them about that. And I kind of use that as a general guide for social media. And I also think it's really important to figure out what that message is. So if the message is the overall lifestyle, then that's one thing. But if you really want to just talk about your work, then that's another. But being able to have those captions in there that tell a little bit more than just the picture, like having the location, the full name of somebody, a hashtag, or the links that will lead to more information. So using it as a way of conveying information, and then as an audience being able to get information and being able to go to someone's profile. I almost always look at new followers if it's a slow day for me. And we'll go back in and look at them just to see who they are and what they're doing. It's kind of curious. So I think the more that's in your profile and on your page that says the message that you want to convey, and then if I like what I see, I will hit follow, and until my feed's too full, I'll probably follow things along. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship. Does that answer it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I'm terrible at moderating my own feed. I just post whatever I want to post. I keep meaning to get better and keep forgetting because I'll see something exciting and not realize it's not exciting for the rest of the world. My cat, for instance. Way too much of my cat in my feed. Yeah, it's different with cats. Some people love them, some people really hate them. To be fair, my cat loves some people and really hates some people. I knew I'd talk about her up here, too. There was an interesting comment on the Social Clay Facebook page about, do you think that social media and connecting in that way is going to replace these type of events, these in-person events like NCECA, if we can connect all year round? Do you think that's going to limit the people who come to these things?
I think it just adds to when you get here, everybody knows I went to China. So we can have better conversations about, what I've been doing because they've been able to keep up with it, and vice versa.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to replace it at all. I think that, if anything, it's an entry point into the conference for people that have never been to the conference. I remember 14 years ago when I came to my first one and walking around and not knowing anybody. And it was kind of hard to feel really connected, And now I think that that it's much easier to feel connected, and that social media can really be a little sort of crack in that facade of impermeability that it could have. And so I think it's a thing that can really connect people, and allow somebody to have kind of an inroads into meeting new people at the conference.
Nothing? Okay, it's your turn. There's a mic in the middle of the room if you guys want to line up. If you have any questions for any of us, all of us together, ask away.
Hi, I have two questions, and this first one's real basic for the artist. How much time managing and inputting and all that kind of stuff, like a week? It seems like it could get overwhelming so fast and take up all of your time. For Brian and Jason.
So my social media practice is integrated into my studio practice, and so I guess perhaps it could take up a lot of time, but so can email, and so can answering the phone, and so can anything that you choose to make take up a lot of time. So I'm fairly intentional about my social media practice, and in that if it's taking me more than a minute or two to make a post, then I don't make it, and I move on and wait until there's something better. And that's sort of a helpful filter for myself. And I also, so much of what I do on social media is done with my phone, and so it's done during what maybe previously would have been downtime. And clearly there's information out there that says maybe that's not great, but that's the reality for me. I don't feel like social media is an overwhelming component of my life, outside of the fact that my studio practice is a overwhelming component of my life.
It's a good question. I don't know exactly how much time. It's probably more than I think it is, if I were to add it up.
Right.
But to me, I think it's just one of those things that the time, on occasion, feels very well spent. You know, if I can, you know, with the Art Access Facebook page or the Instagram account, if I take 5 minutes and I make a post and you know, thousands of people see it, you know, that seems like a well-spent amount of time. And you know, a couple months ago, I posted somebody's work on Art Access on the Instagram page, and 3 hours later, I got an email from that artist saying that somebody saw the picture that I posted of his work, went to the website, emailed him through the website, you know, contacted him through the website, and he sold the piece. And so there are real-life ramifications and real-life, you know, things that happen. And so, you know, I think if I probably spend more time looking at the stuff than I probably should. I think my wife would tell me that too, but maybe not as much time posting.
And I have one more question for Brian. When you're posting your student work, have you spoken to them? I mean, do you get their permission to post their work? Or I'm interested in it, and you know, I have students myself, and I'm not sure that. Like,
yeah.
What do you do there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't ever post anything that would be embarrassing or anything like that. I try to be pretty conscious of that. And they are all, most of them are really engaged with those platforms as well. And so we have a hashtag that's IUS Ceramics. And, you know, when they're firing the kill, you know, there's some of them sitting in the back right now that I can see them. They, you know, Sam Chumley would post pictures of the firing, and I was out of town. And so it was nice to be able to follow what's happening. So we use it as a communication tool even within the program, you know. So, but I try to be thoughtful about what I'm posting to make sure that it's not, you know, embarrassing or anything.
One other thing I think is worth noting about social media is I look at social media as a component of studio practice. And so just like when I'm working at the wheel, the more time I spend on the wheel, the better I get. The more time I spend using social media, the better I get, and the more I'm aware of how to use it. And similarly, photographing my own work, the more I photograph the work, the better I get at it, and the less time it takes. And so integrating it into my studio practice is a reality of getting better at using it as a tool.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. Well, I kind of have two questions, but I'll ask this one first. Since, you know, ceramics are all handmade and individual, do you ever have any problems with somebody who, you know, if they buy something online, do you ever have anybody who thinks, oh, this is, you know, the wrong size or the wrong color? Does that issue ever come up?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? What do you do?
Well, it's mostly because someone didn't read clearly, and I pointed out to them, and 99% of the time they'll go, oh, I see it now. So sorry to bother you. And they go away. Like the person who thought when I listed a mini bowl and said it was 1/2 inch, she thought that read it was 5 inches instead of 0.5 inches. She goes, this isn't mini, this is minuscule. I said, that's the same word. Also, what about 5 inches is mini? But she understood the mistake, and it's a lot, like you notice that Brooke Rosshank always posts her mini drawings with something in the photo for scale. Scale is good.
I think the bigger question, though, is how the image relates to 3 dimensions when we're talking about 3-dimensional objects that have been, you know, reduced to a photograph the size of a phone screen. You know, how much information can you really get from an image versus a real-time, real-life experience? And often it's not just scale, it's the hand, it's the, you know, the throwing marks, it's the sense of volume, it's the relationship between one object and the next in an exhibition as you go through it. So it's a tool, you know, but it's only one of like a lot that you need to have in the toolbox to know and understand what you're looking at, you know, or what I'm trying to convey. So I do a lot with trying to put things in a context, either as a dealer or in the photograph, so that people will not be surprised when they receive a minuscule or a colossal object.
And you had another question?
Well, I don't know if you guys want to finish that one first?
Oh.
Yeah, it's something that I don't particularly have a problem with. I don't sell. Nobody buys my work, so I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. So my next question was, do you ever feel overexposed? Or do you have things like, anybody trying to hack your site or, spamming? I mean, anything like that happen?
All the time.
All the time?
Well, with the spamming.
Yeah.
And I did go to try and get a sandwich at a deli one day in Des Moines, and the guy behind the counter recognized me from my website. And I was wearing kind of sweats. I was having a bad day, and I just wanted a sandwich. So it can be at times a little weird, but as artists, we are putting ourselves out there. Even if we're not on social media, your artwork is yourself, and you are putting yourself out there. So the decision to put your artwork out there and to do shows or any of that is the decision to expose yourself. This is just a different exposure in a way.
And I guess it would also be things like not putting too much personal, like I live right here.
Yeah. Don't do the teenage thing that I've been seeing lately as, look, I just got a new credit card. Here, let me take a picture of it. Yeah, there's a limit.
I think it's an age-old question with copyright, and one of the things that I was, most surprised with was an artist applied for the Korean Biennale with Sergei Isupov's work, and it wasn't his actual work, but what they had done was created decals and then created the work, and it was like it's like playing telephone or something. It was some other version of it, but that's just sort of part of being, sort of copied, but it was really quite shocking.
Well, and I think to piggyback on that, one of the benefits of social media is you're publishing your work, and so when you put something up, it's published, and there's a date with it, and so you're also in a way protecting yourself, because if you're the first one to put it up there and then someone comes and rips it off, it's time stamped with your post, and so you have some sense of ability to direct your own future in that regard. So I look at it in a way as a record keeping of my studio practice, and a way to protect myself and say, I've been doing this since 2004, and when did you start doing it? So that's an aspect that I think is worth noting.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have two questions as well. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of you, I believe, some of you sell on Etsy, I think. So I was wondering what you do to help yourself stand out amongst the many similar things that are on Etsy, and or just in general, how do you is there anything you do to make it more easy to find for people?
Sure. I think one of the critical things is that when I'm posting on Etsy, I tag myself. So everything I post has my name attached to it. And if I go into the stats on Etsy and look, I can see that the most frequent way people find and land on my Etsy page is because they're typing my name into Etsy. And so if you don't do that and someone types your name into Etsy, you don't come up just because your shop is maybe named after you. You have to actually physically tag each piece that you put up with your own name. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that's perhaps a common misconception, and this applies to Etsy but also to everything, is that if you're a small business owner, it is your responsibility to do the marketing, not Etsy's. And so just because you post it doesn't mean the world is going to jump out there and buy it. You have to actually tell them that it's there to be bought. And you have to do that in any way that any small business does that, which means you have to have marketing, and you have to put yourself out there in other ways, and you perhaps have to be on social media, or you need a gallery that's doing that for you, or all of those things. Because just because you're making a post on Etsy doesn't mean people are flocking to your Etsy site.
Thank you.
You don't have to market just on Etsy. You can market everywhere. So I mean, you can buy ads on Etsy, but I'm not convinced that those are necessarily worth buying. I think it's better to look at the world as and identify your own market and say who actually wants to buy this, and then go out and tell them about it. And that could mean joining an Instagram feed or an Instagram hashtag. It could be buying an ad in a magazine. I mean, it could be 1,000 different things that anyone does with marketing, and it's your Etsy page is just the portal in which someone can make that purchase. But you could also have a different online gallery system, not just Etsy.
And then my next question is, you guys brought up the issue of people trying to rip off work, and so when it becomes an issue, how do you deal with protecting yourself? Obviously you said that when you post you have a timestamp, but is there other ways that you can protect yourself and your intellectual property?
Do you know anything? I mean,
I have asked people to stop ripping me off.
Yeah, you can always talk to them.
I think it's. I mean, the first thing is to be kind and generous. I think often people, when they're ripping you off, there are people who are intentionally ripping you off because they want lots of money, but those people are rare. I think often people are ripping you off because they like your work and they want to grow as artists, and so you can be generous and say, hey, you're actually ripping me off, and the clay world's not that big of a world, and people are going to notice. So I think that's worth doing. If someone's actually intentionally ripping you off to make money, then you can pursue legal means to protect yourself, and that's worth doing sometimes.
I think the fact that so many images are shared, it's almost hard for people who absorb that information to remember where it came from. So I've had calls come to me about artwork I'm showing, questioning the artist and whether that artist knows about their work that was done previously. And that's an awkward moment. So I end up trying to at least put these two people together to have that discussion, and get out from in between it. But it's definitely out there, and there's so much work that's being done in honor of. So it's part of art practice, and I think that just being open and calling up and not assuming it was predatory, but it may just be somebody copied your idea thinking it was a great idea and doesn't even remember that it was your idea.
Yeah, I think I would add to that by saying that this is obviously not, not from, the artwork perspective, but I have a website called claybucket.com, and I put all of my syllabi, my teaching materials, my projects, demonstration videos, all kinds of information. And I think that, I've had people tell me like, oh yeah, I taught my beginning class with all your projects. And, I think that there's something really cool about sharing information and being a part of a conversation that advances our community and our field. And so, I don't know if this is getting really totally at your question, but I think that it just kind of depends on what it is. Like it's okay to have some of your information, some of the things that you've worked on, reused, because it advances what we're all doing here. I mean, we're here to learn, and I think that, I'm not as interested in siloing information. I think that the information should be out there for people to use, and they will build farther on it, just the same way that I have built my projects off of other people's interests in their projects, so I think that it just kind of depends on what it is. I mean, if it's really blatant, that's a problem. But if it's something that's inspired by and extends the things that you're doing, then, and at least in the case of the educational arena, I think that's a great thing.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any more questions? Or do I get to ask you guys questions? How many of you are already on Instagram, Twitter, any of those? How many of you are not? So now you people who are not know who to ask to help you get on. Those people who had their hands raised are your new best friends. Because we are a community here, and we are here to help each other, to learn, to make changes, to discuss things, and to improve our lives and our practices as artists. So one of those things could be helping your peers get involved in social media. And that's why we're here. That's why we wrote articles. That's why I've posted the social media lexicon. It's kind of the point is to help each other, to try and, if that's one of your goals, get on there and communicate. And I think we have another question.
Hi. I'm wondering about physical spaces and if you see social media, your web presence and social media replacing the traditional gallery space. And Leslie, you said a lot of your sales are virtual sales. So I'm wondering what value having a physical space is still bringing to the business.
My whole life has been dealing with that question. Real estate is very expensive, and in our field, whether it's at 4 figures or 5 figures, it's still real estate eats it all up. So the question is it important? And I've gone periods of my professional life without a space and using just the art fairs, but the art fairs are hugely expensive also. So I kind of go back and forth depending on what artists I'm working with as to where to allocate those resources. Right now we're doing fewer fairs and having the space on the Mass MoCA campus, thinking that's pretty important. And as I meet people who are confused about who we are and what we do, I realize that the Mass MoCA location at least is one place that they can virtually think of me being, even if they're not there. And it validates the exhibit that goes up there, even if no one sees it. They see it on the website, they see it through Instagram or Facebook, but they know it's in a space. So it's a really weird phenomenon that I have to have a space to take pictures in for people to not go to. I mean, what's with that?
All right, we're about done here. Did you guys need to have an argument?
No, but I was just gonna add one more thing to the idea, your question about the physical space. That in the university setting, that physical space of the studio, the classroom, can be extended through digital means in a really great way. And on the Clay Bucket website, for example, I put demonstrations that I've done, and sometimes when my students are learning a new process or learning throwing or something, and I do the demo and I film it and I put it up there, then they can go back at 2 in the morning when I'm not there and watch that demo again. And it's something that only enhances the physical space. It's taking some of that physical space and taking that energy and putting it into another arena so that they can access some of that same information in another context.